May We Be Forgiven is a story about family and about competition between two brothers, and what I describe in some ways as a midlife coming-of-age story. The two main characters are Harold and George Silver, and they have a kind of Cain and Abel sort of a competition between the two of them. And after very tragic events occur very early in the book, Harold sort of steps into his brother's life, into George's life, and takes over raising George's children. And Harold had always been a man waiting for his life to begin, and now begins to discover that in order for life to begin, you have to take action, you have to do something to begin your life. It's a darkly comic book. It's meant to both be funny, and the funniness allows us to get more serious about sort of ideas of family and expectation and forgiveness. And it's a sort of a wild ride. I think the book definitely has, in some ways, a sort of a biblical dimension, and it's also a lot about the need for the question of a spiritual life and the role of a spiritual life. And in the relationship between the brothers, there's definitely the kind of push-pull and murderous rage that one sees between brothers. So that's definitely there. Yeah. I think what's interesting between Harry and George is that the question of is Harry trying to become a better version of George is interesting, because Harry's really the older brother, but he's felt that his role in the family was usurped by George, who was certainly the one who demanded more attention. And George is a very volatile character, very unpredictable. And I think that Harry emerges as the more powerful brother, in part because he's able to be in control. I think he's also a better person than George and has better values. And he's certainly a better parent. And so in his taking over of parenting of George's children, the thing I find fascinating is that Harry actually grows up. He becomes an adult. He becomes the man that he always sort of wanted to be. I mean, I think, for me, Richard Nixon is a fascinating figure, in part because he was the president of my late childhood and of my own moral coming of age. But also I think Nixon's behavior and things that he said, like, if the president does it, it's not illegal, unfortunately inspired other American presidents to do other horrible things. And I think, interestingly, too, he was a man who was bitter, who had very few friends, who kept a list of enemies. I find it fascinating that such a man would become the president of the United States. And he became president at a time when technology was just emerging, so we hadn't gotten used to seeing the president on TV, and Nixon did not do well on television. He made all these tape recordings of his conversations, which I'm not sure now a president would do, because it seems you don't necessarily want a recording of all your conversations. So he's the president of a very interesting time period in American culture, and many of his actions resonate through where we are now. Things like opening relations with China, which now is a huge power in terms of the global economy, and in terms of certainly China owns more U.S. debt, which really means it owns more of America than any other country in the world. And I find that both ironic and sort of worrisome in some ways for where it might lead us next.